Hey, this is Cap, and you're watching Thorin, the only man besides Richard Lewis who somehow found a way to get both League of Legends and Dota Redditors to hate him.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Strat Book, and for this episode, we are joined by Devilwalk, who is the coach of GODsent. Not obviously the old GODsent with Pronax. This is actually the one that's like the multinational lineup that's actually been doing pretty well, but obviously ESL doesn't give a fuck, do they? You know, scenes is corrupt now, innit? So, and of course, my usual co-host here, LEGIJA, who obviously hasn't been watching any of the episodes himself because he's decided to become a pro player again. So I thought he'd learned from that. I thought we'd gotten past that, LEGIJA. Thought everything could be cool now, but no, apparently you just want to get flamed again. So, okay, well.
I'll take it as a drive. Take it as a drive.
Okay. Right, Devilwalk, for this episode, right, obviously the premise of this show is we bring on mainly like in-game leaders, coaches, and the idea is to talk about topics or go into some depth that you don't get when it's like normal shows, because a lot of shows basically, like the theme is pretty obvious, isn't it? It's just like, here are the big topics of the week, and then people can give like a sentence or just a very brief thought, and it's okay for like, you know, getting people's like hot takes, but you don't get a lot of depth to it. So one area I actually want to ask you about initially is, what a lot of people won't remember this, but once you finished being a pro player in FNATIC, you initially were actually listed as the coach because you were like still going to events with them when they had the really good lineup with like Crimson, Olaf, etc. And Pronax obviously was still in the team, and you would sometimes stand behind them and you would talk with Pronax between the maps and stuff. Like, do you actually consider back then? I know there wasn't really many actual like real coaches back then. Did you consider yourself a coach? What do you think? Would you have said you were doing back then with FNATIC?
I mean, even when I was playing, I was kind of always the support caller, I think.
Okay. So it's kind of quite common in Sweden, right, to have like a secondary caller as well who kind of like puts the head together with the IGL, right?
Yeah, it's like if he sees something on the other side of the map that the in-game leader doesn't see, he can make a quick call or stuff like that. I always had that background that I would help the in-game leader in some sense. And I think for me in Pronax, it was just a natural fit also because we think kind of differently of Counter-Strike, like what we think is like what we prefer to do basically.
Okay.
So I think maybe back then I was kind of confused what my objective was in practice games, whilst in officials I think I had more impact with keeping everyone in check mentally, you know, supporting them with energy and stuff, but taking timeouts and a lot of the time shifting maybe focus more than calling actual strategies back then. It would be maybe we have focused too much on A. They fast rotate. Maybe we need to start focusing a little bit towards B to make our A rounds.
Like tendencies.
Yeah, like small stuff like that to help the in-game leader call more clearly. Because sometimes, you know, you have the best strategy in the world, you call it, and you walk into a 4-man stack. What's missing?
Yes.
Could be that we haven't defaulted enough in the round that we take a pause, we call go A and we're going to do this strat, but it's so obvious because we're just instantly going there, right? Sometimes you need to default a little bit more and kind of trick them that you're still weighing your options.
That's actually one area I think we could start right there with an interesting topic, which is one area I actually think there's a flaw in Counter-Strike is a lot of the really brilliant in-game leaders. I'm talking about the guys who essentially they think to themselves they can be the coach and the in-game leader essentially. Like they want full control. I think of people in the past, like, I mean, they'd probably admit this, people like Carrigan, you know, Existence. Like, these are the guys who think like as you're saying, like, I've called the right strat. Like, you know, I've been in this scenario a million times. I've won the championship. But I think one thing they miss is that the coach isn't in the game. So he has a different view of the game, a different focus, as you're saying. So if you're the in-game leader, one of the problems that a lot of people who are fans will never understand about players and in-game leaders is because they're in that round, they're they're like what you call like a prisoner of the moment. Like they're just thinking about this round now. They don't have like the bigger picture, right? So even if you're just in this case, as you're saying here, maybe sometimes all you're doing is being another set of eyes, as we say in English, you know, like that has value in itself, right? And the smartest guy in the world can get caught up in that moment of this battle of what he thinks he's doing or trying to do, but maybe he doesn't notice there's something very obvious he's missing, right?
Yeah.
100%.
No, definitely. And I think a lot of people make that mistake also, especially when you're newly grinding or newly created teams. I think defaulting into stratting is like kind of a difficult step to take instead of just doing the strat. Because there's a lot of thought process that goes behind it. If you are using how many nades, so how many nades can you do the default with? How many nades do you need to survive with? Who can actually put pressure on the map compared to not? Because if you lose one guy that is, you know, has all the utility, he cannot make pressure. He needs to stay relatively safe, and you need to figure out how many people does it actually take to make the strat. You know, sometimes you need only 4, sometimes you need only 3, and in very, I would say, few scenarios, you need 5 people to make a strat work.
Sure.
But a lot of people, I think, maybe takes more risks than they need to when they default into stratting. I think it's a hard obstacle that needs to be talked about for each strat. How do you default if you want to make that strat compared to just making the strat? It means it's easy to drive around a strat. It's going to be perfect after 2-3 tries, but making it work after a default and when the either CTs or Ts put pressure on you is more difficult.
But yeah, you've obviously been in all these positions, right? Because you've been the in-game leader, you've been the secondary caller, you've been the coach.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that you said with like how does the round end and how can I actually end up executing my round if I had like a plan before the round, and let's say we call it default into A execute, B execute, whatever, and you lose a person. Many people make often the mistake to how would you call it? Like they try to take too much room, and with that they kind of risk too much. And then you say, as Devilwalk said, he's a key player. Like let's say you're the lurk position, you don't use your equipment at the beginning, which means for me, obviously, if I end up A, I will be one of the guys throwing the grenades. And many people still make that mistake that they go a little bit too far and then like in default die. I try to take a little bit more room, but the CTs often don't even know. That's the same, like, let's say it's 1 minute you took, like, on Mirage, you have B, guy won somewhere close. It's a very defaultish round, you fall back from middle. The enemies will not always know. The enemies will also not always push you somewhere. So just take your time. It's not always that you're so readable. People tend to think that they're always like, they know we're coming A, they know we're coming A. Even if we are coming, you don't care, brother. You don't care. So don't worry about that too much. Just make sure that you are able to finish your execute as you have planned it before. But because you have to play always worst case scenario, you cannot always say, yeah, okay, I made a lot of pressure on B. There will be 3 guys 100% B and the 2 guys on A. So people make always, or still like often, I still see these days that people make these mistakes, and it's important how you set up and build up your round. If you have a goal, and not risk really too much.
Well, it's difficult with, especially if you have like a lot of young players. They like the challenge, no matter what, you know. And it's harder. It's kind of hard sometimes to tone them back in that sense, because they're so confident in what they're doing, and sometimes that just fucks up, and then you have 50 seconds left, and you have to rethink your whole idea of the round, and that can be challenging.
Isn't that one of the areas, without making it sound too negative, this is just kind of a consequence of like the FPL era of Counter-Strike, where they think because they're playing with other pros that they're playing pro Counter-Strike. I always tell those players, like, you're basically just running like an aim simulator right now, mate. Like, you're not playing Counter-Strike. Like, that's not team Counter-Strike. Like, in that scenario, it's a PUG. So, of course, like, you're having a 1v1 battle at, like, short on Mirage. But, like, if you're in a strat, you wouldn't be doing it that way all the time. Like, peeking the guy, giving him a chance to kill you, going early. Like, in that scenario, like, it's a different type of Counter-Strike you're playing.
Yeah,
100.
of course.
Sorry,
I mean,
go ahead.
yeah, I mean, FPL, it's more about taking risks in timings than anything else. Like, if you put FPL play into team, then your team is shit, no matter what. I mean, unless everyone does it in a sense that your strats aren't working. Like that's the last way you want to play is FPL. But sometimes that's needed, especially if you're getting either out-stratted as CT, that you're just getting out-rotated. Your rotation systems are just not working. Then it could be a good idea to put like actual, let's go FPL mode, because
Yes.
we need to like actually put pressure on them because we cannot strategically win against them. So you've kind of forced your way into more of a 50-50 than calculated round wins.
One thing I'd be very interested to know what you think about, by the way, because I know with LEGIJA coming from the German scene, that they have a very set, regimented way of how they operate over there and how teams have been structured and how communication works. So I know actually he might be very interested to discuss this, is when you were in that FNATIC team, so before kind of like the true coaching period, but I actually have a question about that era, because that was the era when, if people remember, you could actually have those VODs released by ESL at like Pro League and the major in Katowice, I think, and maybe Cologne as well. I can't remember if they did it as well. I know they did a couple where you could basically hear the voice comms. And actually, because Fnatic was the best team at the time, people even did like a subtitled version of like, it was like an overpass game. I remember there was one. And when people went and watched this VOD, it was very eye-opening, Devilwalk, because if people didn't know any Swedish teams, I'd actually worked in SK Gaming in 1.6, so I'd kind of like stood behind teams before and heard them. But I know a lot of people, especially Americans, they were thinking this VOD was going to be like the motherlord. They thought like, right, what I'm going to do when I see this VOD is I'm going to realize why Pronax is a genius. Like I'm going to hear him. What they think all the genius in gaming is that he's going to be like a chess master. He's going to be telling everyone to like move at this time and go here, and then he's going to, after the round, be breaking it down. Like, right, this is why that tactic didn't work. Like we didn't hit them at 35 seconds. And then what you actually found when you listened to these VODs was extremely little amount of communication. Very little was said. There would be simple things said in spawn, and they would actually be quite similar to what you were discussing earlier. It would be something like, I think we're hitting B too much. Like, let's try like a slow A push this time, you know.
Yeah.
And then that would be it, though. He wouldn't even give much more than that. Like, the players would just know what he meant. They would go and do it. And even on CT side, like, it was crazy. Like, they were barely ever coming. Like, you think about the famous, like, what people have made a meme out of, but it's real. The NA teams really are like, I think there's one B guy, I'm shooting a guy, fuck, he's coming through smoke. God, he got me. Like, that really happens in those comms. I heard it a blast. But again, if you listen to the Fnatic players, and remember, at the time, they had some of the best CT sides. They had people who were doing crossfires and playing off each other. And people, again, were barely communicating, which suggests to me, like, first of all, culturally, there's a very different vibe as to, like, how much communication do we want? Like, do we want people talking a lot? But also, I'm guessing it must mean the way you practiced must have been different. Like, people essentially, there must be like a sense, right, of you have a responsibility. You're supposed to know what you're supposed to do. I don't tell you every round. So what would you say about this Devilwalk?
No,
Just
but
quickly, before you say anything, Devilwalk, I'm very sorry. I've actually watched a fun fact VOD of NIP. I don't know if you guys have seen it. They also post on their YouTube, on their own YouTube channel, their communications. And I have not in my life seen a calmer, quieter voice channel than NIP in my entire life. Like, genuinely, this was, I don't know if it was amazing to me or if it was like, what the fuck are they doing? It's like a situation where you say like you're executing B on overpass, where you have to like 1 barrels, 1 pillar, 1 water, whatsoever. There's so much communication, but for them it's so 1 water, 1 barrels, dead, 1 shot. It's so quiet, and I don't know. Like, for me, it sounded very beautiful because I'm like, for us, it's like a lot loud communication in German, in my past teams at least, and especially myself. I'm a guy who talks a lot, which I think is a big habit or negative for me. But it was so amazing, and I wonder now if it's like the Swedish culture that you guys have, and like if it comes from the old guys.
I think it is kind of Swedish to be that calm, but I also think that especially if you have a team that is so highly individually skilled, all they really need is a sound in game. So like, you try to minimize everything. I mean, even in our current team, we're working with like keywords. So it can be, for example, if someone is stuck underground on overpass, they have taken balloons area, and the smoke is about to disappear in underground that is put up. You can just say Ryan. And that means that the B guys has to take short to save Private Ryan.
Right.
So all you say is Ryan, and that's the B guys will then know they have to take short to save him. And and stuff like that we still did, but for us it was a lot about listening. And when you have like players like Flasha, JW, a lot of it came down to individual plays and how they used utility. Like Flasha, for example, is like crazy insane with his utility. Like he hits HE grenades. I don't think he's ever wasted one. Like normally we do like maybe it's there, you just throw it, but Flasha always hits it. And I think it's a lot about sound, and then it's about knowing yourself. But every time, it doesn't matter if you play Swedish FPL or whatever, it's usually very few worded, all the comms. It's like you just expect people to trade, and if I say it's there, and then you listen to the gunfight and you swing if you have the opportunity to. But I think it's more about hearing the sound, and I think people play a lot better like the less you communicate. I think that's the goal ultimately in the end anyways. I think it's good to start off in a team with overcoming, but try to tone it down, because you need to get to know each other, and then you know each other, and then you like try to remove as much as possible.
Nice. I'll give you my analogy, LEGIJA. Like, I have basically a premise that I built actually off this exact scenario where I got to see like how different the Swedish approach was. Like, I actually think American is the worst, just because unfortunately too many of them. I even think it's a byproduct of like their scene. Like their scene.
I've heard chaos comms. They seem pretty decent though.
Oh, okay. But I mean, I know in a lot of American teams, they are the most infamous scene for like cutting a guy immediately, then bringing a new guy. So the premise, right, even makes sense with my theory here. Like, they're not idiots when they do this. Their problem is this. If you're starting with a brand new team, and especially if all the players aren't, as Devilwalk says, like super experienced or skilled or people who know what they're doing, initially what you're doing with the comms basically is think of it like the concept of scaffolding. When you're going to build the building, you put the scaffolding up so that holds the structure up while you're building the building. Then once it's built, you take the scaffolding down. The problem the American teams are having here is their skill level improves, but they never take the scaffolding down. So even I'm not exaggerating, teams like Team Liquid, people are really doing, like, it's not as bad as the meme, but it's not far off. People are really having gunfights, like 2 here, 1 here, I think 1 behind me, like, and the guys just comment way too much. It's like, dude, like, you're in one of the most skilled teams in the world. Like, if you actually com half as much, that guy might have time to hear something. He might I'm sure he already heard you earlier when he said it. Like, one thing I definitely think, this might be a cultural difference as well, but one thing I think they've really missed the boat on is that whole thing of like, well, when I said it 4 times really loud, that meant I really meant it. That needs to be deleted. Like, when you said it, you meant it, dude. If you didn't mean it, don't say it. Like, if you just say it once, even if, as you're saying, like, it might seem extremely gear when I agree, when you're doing an execute that's hurried and then they're just like, 1 dead banana, like, yeah, but like, to be fair though, that should mean the same thing. You know, the guy should know what that means. You shouldn't have to have like an extra, almost like emotional part, because that's almost like you're trying to like control your teammate and make him stop thinking whatever he was thinking in his brain and just take the importance of a kill that you've decided he has to do. So like, I could see how that could throw people off a bit.
I mean, just look at like, just compare them on LAN. If let's say they win a round, let's take the old FNATIC. Like, they win a round, there was like pretty much almost zero emotions. Maybe like Olof was like, he was a little bit happy, but Flasha quiet, Krim's quiet, JW can be a little bit louder, yes. Pronax usually a more quiet guy, but like look at Liquid, Stewie jumping up on desks, Twist is super hyped, the Sidecar hype kid. Like, I think also that like brings a lot to that. And I noticed myself, like, after rounds, like, I always hyped up my team, and I noticed myself that it makes me nervous, and it makes me like, I don't know, I had to calm down, and calming down was for me talking. Just talk. Talk and be quiet, and calm everyone down, especially myself. And I think that was a big negative for myself, like being this too hyped person and like losing focus maybe, or like composure for the next round.
I think you lose awareness maybe.
Absolutely,
it's like calm and aware is like the perfect where you want to be. Like,
I even think as well, because one thing I always try to do is, Like, unless someone genuinely has been like obnoxious or they actually are really stupid, you should never take someone else doing something in a less efficient way and assume they're an idiot. Like, I think also this approach, by the way, like what you're saying there, Legija, because that's a very common thing. In fact, you hear a lot of commentators talk about that, where they're like, yeah, I want them to be all pumped up and like, where's the energy, dude? Like, it's not like, they're not idiots, by the way. If you consider like level 0, the starting point of being a player is if you went into the match and you were just a guy who's a beginning pro, you probably wouldn't be shouting and screaming. What you'd initially do is you'd just be too focused on yourself. You'd be in your own little world. You'd be worried about, oh, what am I doing here? So in that scenario, right, you can do quite a good effort to like, if your teammates like pumping you up, like, yeah, no, great job. Like, and don't worry about that one, fist bump anyway. Like, that can be level 1. That's like, we're bringing the team together. We're getting all on the same page. We also have identified, by the way, that if we don't look at our emotional state, it could drift into a bad place. So that's the person thinking, right, I'm trying to fix our emotional state by putting us in a good position. Like, we believe in each other. But in my opinion, if you look at a lot of the great competitors in many sports, the level after that is what you're talking about. It's to be like non-reactive. It's like to control your emotion. Because the part people never talk about when they talk about being hyped is that can work. Yeah, sometimes it happens and you're doing the amazing upset and every round everyone's pumped. But like you're saying, Legija, it's like that energy can be neutral. Like, it can go the other way as well. Like, that can then create pressure. Like, I tell you what, everyone knows the round, because the American teams have done it as well, where they win the big round. Like, let's say they have Deagles and they kill you when you have full buy, and they're all like, woo, do all that. I tell you what, if you then just wreck them the next round, you could hear a fucking mouse walk across the floor, because they will be so quiet, and the effect will go the reverse. Now they'll be super low because they were so reliant on the fact that like everything's working, we're all hyped. Like, I don't think they're stupid. I think it's just that they've already gotten part of the puzzle, as it were,
Yeah, just take Taz as an example. Like, he's been the biggest trash talker, and I don't think, like, if you trash talked him back then in his prime, he didn't give a fuck. This guy didn't give a fuck. And I know, and I remember the battle between him and against Apex, and there was one scene where him and Aprox or Capio, I'm not 100% sure, in 1.6 had a battle, and he's been shouting, like, during the game, shouting over to him, hey, Capio, wo wohnst du? Where do you live? Yes. And you see, like, Capio's face is, like, going down. He's been, like, really emotional. And Taz, on the other side, like, he knows how to deal with these emotions. Like, if I'm loud, if I'm hyped up, he knows how to thrive with it. He's riding the wave. But other people are going the wave. Now they fucking lose around him.
Yes.
And then you're down, and then you're destroyed, mentally destroyed.
But I do think that every person has, a set, like, this is where I'm the best. You know, some people, they have to be super loud, and that's when they like really thrive. And some people, they just want to be quiet as a mouse, and that's a problem sometimes. I can explain, like, in our team, I'm always loud. Like, I will always scream if we win a round. I will always be like very emotional in that sense, whilst Stiko, he wants peace and quiet. This is just a regular day for him. It's a walk in the park, very, very chill. But then we have, Pavle Madden from Montenegro, and he's also loud, he's also very excited. So there's definitely, you have to create your hype balance or hype scale for yourself. And make sure that you're not too affected or too hyped up. And there's ways to create that. Everyone has, like, these little things before the games they do. I remember, like, JW will always calmly go to the bathroom, clean his hands, his, like, rituals stuff.
Sure.
I mean, I would always, like, smash myself in the chest to pump myself up. Like, like, let's fucking go. Like,
I mean, to be fair, you sometimes see footballers do that, where you do the fake, like, boxing training where the guy punches you in the chest to get you going. Some people just want that. Yeah, of course.
So everyone has their little things to, like, get them riled up or calm down. Like, everyone's different, but it's about figuring out where on the scale are you.
Legija, did you ever see the classic, like, he did it as a fake warm-up ritual? Because one of the great things about CSGO players is, because everyone's so used to being in stage matches and being on camera, everyone learned, like, if the red light's on, like, I can play up to the camera. And so a lot of people very famously, like, they have, like, amazing on-camera charisma in that sense. Well, one of them is, right, when that FNATIC team got really good, and they knew that, like, when the game's about to begin, they sometimes film, like, B-roll of you for the analysis desks, that while we're talking, they'll show FNATIC as we're talking about, right? Flusher obviously knew this, because famously, he did, like, a troll warm-up. Did you ever see this? Where he used to just sit there, and instead of warming up in, like, CS aimbots or whatever, he would just sit there and examine those major trolls trophies that he'd won, because Valve gave you the trophy in the game. He would just sit cycling through them, like the biggest troll of all time. But I tell you what, it was funny. I can't lie. Like I used to think this guy's such a fucking troll.
But he's a massive troll. But I would say that he would never, ever, ever warm up before a game.
Okay.
Ever.
What's the logic behind it though? Does that help him, do you think?
He would say, I think I remember him saying like, I mean, if you're good enough, you should just be able to wake up and play.
Right, listen, that is a baller thing to say, but I'm not sure it's true. It's baller. Okay, listen, here's the thing, Devilwalk. Again, just like the trophy thing, as long as you do win the majors, like we can't talk shit on it. It's pretty cool, but I'm not sure that is entirely accurate though. I get where he's coming from though.
To one of those FNATIC players and hate big dick.
The thing is, though, I have to say, you would love to have a teammate like that. Because in that scenario, what he's really telling you is, I'm not going to let it bother me, even if I start the game cold. Who gives a fuck? Like, if I'm good, I'm going to win the game. That is a kind of, in a way, I sort of see the upside of that mentality. He's not just trolling when he says that, is he?
No, but Russia is special. Let me say this as well. We used to practice sometimes, and sometimes we would not be able to, like, if he's A on, let's say, Dust 2, as CT, and we would lose B 2-3 rounds in a row. He would just say, like, move. I will take B now. And he would just, like, let me show you how to play. And he would just go and ace, he would just, like, run around and just take his, like, I don't know, ZZ or run around and kill, like, 4 people. And it's like, okay. And he's like, that's how you hold B. And then he would go back to A,
But my question is, like, you say that it might be good or, like, baller to do that, but I don't know, like, there's rarely in any sport people say, okay, if I don't have my warm-up routine, I will not perform to my very best. Do you think he would have performed much better than he did? Obviously, he was one of the, if not the best.
Hard to say.
But it just doesn't make sense for me. Like, it cannot make you worse. It cannot make you worse or weaker. Obviously, I understand if it's like a 10-15 minute warm-up and you have a fucking other routine, but it's interesting to me to say, like, I'm not, if you're the best player in the world or if you think you're good at the game, you can just wake up and play it.
I think what he did, the only thing he used to do was, like, he would lower or higher his sense by, like, 0.125 or something. So if he felt like, he would just move his mouse, like, in, like, a server. Yes. And then he would, that feels a little bit too fast. So we'd lower it by 125 or something. Genius. And then that's it. And then it's like, that feels good.
Here's the thing, LEGIJA. I know what you mean. Like, in the most, like, if we're talking about an optimal scenario, rather, obviously, like, in theory, he would be slightly more warmed up if he just did that before and if he did some. But the point in this scenario to me is because it's someone who is hitting peak performance, essentially, these are his versions of rituals. Like, his ritual there, by the way, is even though it's obviously not accurate that moving your mouse sense up and down like that's going to, like, fix it. As long as he thinks in his mind it does, though, it means he now never worries about the mouse sensitivity. He goes, right, well, I fixed that at the beginning, now I just play. So it's more about, like, how he gets, like Devilwalk was saying, to where he needs to emotionally be or mentally be in the game. Because the most extreme example ever, and people will never understand this, right? And there's a modern day one, but I won't call out who that person is, but the old school one that we all know from the pro scene is Shocks, right? Where it's not a joke, this is a real thing, and I think everyone knows it, that Shocks would literally, during the nights of a massive tournament, sometimes just go out and party till like 3 a.m. and be in the nightclub. And even though, listen, there were certainly some games where he wasn't as good the next day, one of the real problems with this is it's not as simple as, like, never do that, kids. Because, like, Shocks is a special person. Sometimes I've seen him actually be the 30 bomb guy in the game the next day when he did actually, I know, like, I was there in the club. I know he can't have had like 7 hours sleep. He had to have had like 4 hours and be mildly hungover. But the point I always had in that scenario was, I don't know Shocks as a person well enough to know, like, maybe he's the guy where if you made him, say you literally, like, was prison guard, you came in and, like, you've got to be in bed at 9 p.m, like, turn off all the electronics. Maybe a guy like that just goes crazy from that. Maybe he can't handle it. Maybe he needs to let off some steam. Yeah. So, like, I agree. Listen, it will never be optimal to drink and be hungover the night before. But there's a certain person where, as fucked up as it sounds, they know themselves better than you in some, like, when they're as good as they are, sometimes they can have their own rules, in my opinion. Sounds whack, because I know if you were the worst player in the team, I'd never let you get away with that.
I think it goes both ways. They can also destroy their own.
Oh, certainly, yes.
Brother, you can take John Jones as an example. This guy's been, he said in several interviews, he's been coked up, partying, drunk as fuck, going one night before a fight against Alexander Gustafsson.
Yes.
And he just, obviously, it was a close fight, but He demolished
He didn't
other
lose,
fighters,
yeah.
destroyed them.
Yeah.
And he says himself, now imagine I wouldn't have done that. I would have worked out, I would have eaten better, however you call it, or I don't know, just worked on myself for the fight. This guy could have been much better. So Flusher, for example, I'm just taking Flusher as an example now.
Yeah.
Imagine he would have his warm-up all the time. He would do all the time his stuff and not think, I'm a good player if I want to perform, like I'm good enough or whatever. This guy could have had a legacy like Simple does now, as the best player in the fucking world for now, the last 2 years. The best player. Obviously, he has a certain legacy. He's been one of the best players. He's won one of the most trophies in the game. But he could have done way more. So, I don't know. I just don't want to talk that good, you know. Obviously, everyone, as you said, everyone should know himself. Everyone knows how to perform. Probably.
I think it's just a simple way for him to tell himself, I know I'm that good, you know, like I'm that confident, you know.
Okay.
He's like,
It's been, what can I say?
You know, it's like, I wouldn't recommend doing like he does either, you know. I agree with you, like he could definitely done better, but I still think like there was a certain charm with it, because everyone else like in the team is like warming up for an hour, and he's just spectating you warming up, you know, like.
Oh, by the way, let's be real. Everyone in this call had to work really hard at their jobs to actually get where we did. So part of the reason why, even though we all wouldn't do it ourselves, because we just never would have, you'd have never heard of any of us if we'd have all fucked around like that. But even more so, that's why we also appreciate it, because we know that, like, fuck, to be able to even get away with that is, there's something cool about it. Because put it this way, you'd have never heard of me if I just fucked around all the time and never put any work in, never did it. Of course not. You'd be a nobody. I'd even say as well, this is why I say LEGIJA, I sort of get how in his mind that's his ritual. Because like I say, the effect is that it makes him not worry about the game. It makes him think, well, yeah, I'm good enough, so there's nothing to worry about, right? And also, why would I need to warm up? Like, because the reason why I think that I can see a logic to that is because I've known some players who went the other way, in a sense that in theory should fit the optimal, but actually made them worse. So I'll tell you right now, this is one of the things that people like Device have suffered with in their careers. One of their problems was, because they know, like, the more you prepare and the more optimally the situation is, the better you're going to perform, they over-focus on that. So what they would be thinking instead is like, oh, I could have prepared a bit more, or like, I didn't quite get to that. And actually, even though the impetus is good, like, it's to try and be the most prepared, when the game starts, you have to acknowledge, like, right, that's it, I can't do any more now, I've got to go with whatever, you know, and I need to forget that thinking. That could go the other way and hurt you, right?
Yes, okay, but now let's say your Device, and you did that, and you think, fuck, maybe we overworked, maybe we thought too much, maybe we could have done more. Now, what happened to Device now? His team is the best team in the world for 2 years. So if he learned from his mistakes, and mastered this kind of skill, then nothing is going to stop you. What can stop you? Like, if you learn how to build up from this mistake that you did, or maybe overthinking, if I work too much, if you find a healthy way of preparing for a game.
Oh, I agree, yes. Yeah.
It will make you fucking unstoppable.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, that wasn't the method that made him great, by the way. I actually think overcoming that is what made him great, you know, because he was overthinking, basically, you know, like.
Yes, but you learn from
I agree, yeah.
You fucked up, I'm mentally weak now, I feel sick, I didn't eat well, I don't sleep good, I'm thinking too much of the game. You learn from all these mistakes.
Yes.
And if you learn really from that and use it as an advantage, then your opponent is still at the step where you were, like, 6 months ago.
Yeah. By the way, Devilwalk, one thing, earlier on when you said that one of the reasons why when you were in FNATIC you were taking on that role when you no longer played is because you and Pronax like had a different way of thinking about the game, or you were on the same page. Being as Pronax doesn't play as an in-game leader anymore, and I've talked to him, like, he has no plans to. Give us some. What does that mean? Like, like, how did Pronax see the game, or how was this FNATIC team trying to play the game? Because I think it's very interesting. Because as I say, if you look at those VODs, you would think there was no tactics; that everyone's just doing everything individually. But like what you actually said, believe it or not, there's videos you can go back and check them. Is what I actually guessed that you were doing. Is that what you'd done? Is the communication was so good that it's like in a computer, you know, the concept of a macro, like one key that you press does like 4 or 5 actions. It's like that. You'd compressed it so that one word could mean the whole paragraph that another guy might say. So what was the vision in FNATIC? How did you guys want to play? I mean, obviously everyone thinks it's just defaulting and then Genius is winning the round, but it can't just be that.
I mean, the idea is quite simple. The idea is that every round someone should take an initiative and play default off that. But it depends what initiative is taken. So everyone should. I remember, like, it could be on Dust 2, you know, if you have long spawn, you would always take the long spawn. Like, that's a very simple way of looking at it. But how do you utilize the long spawn? You can't just all go long every round.
Yes.
You know, you have to do things differently. But the general census was that taking initiatives and getting into more, like, I would say less 5v5 scenarios than you could. Because we had people that were so good at reading the game that the less numbers there were, the more opportunities for them to read the game. Whilst less experienced teams would make more mistakes the less people they are, because they've only practiced one area of,
Yes.
like, only practiced the theory of 5.
Yes.
So the more people you kill and the more you trade down, the more chance there is for us to win, basically. So we encourage taking risks. For example, JW is a big thing to say. Like, I would always say, like, it doesn't matter if JW fucks up, because he will win us more than he loses. So we have no reason to flame him as long as it's working. Like, more than it's not working.
I'd even say I feel like you had the perfect team in that regard of how players balanced each other out. Because I always used to say the reason why JW works in FNATIC is because Flasher's there. Like, look, you have a super aggressive guy.
especially.
Crims is another one. You have a super aggressive guy making all these crazy moves, which, by the way, in itself will draw attention from the opponent. They have to account for him. They have to wonder if he's behind them. But then at the same time, you've got players like Crims is like the ultimate like anchor, just sit in the site. Like, it doesn't matter if there's one less guy. He might just kill 2 people. And then Flasher is doing like the most genius passive lurks ever anyway. So like these players, if you put them together, all make each other stronger.
Yeah, but I also think that we were a team that didn't think strategy per se, but I would say that we thought playstyle counters playstyle.
Right.
So instead of strategically thinking of a round or how to use utility, we would, you know, think, okay, Navi plays X, they will execute the 10 seconds, let's hold our molos. Yeah, like, this is a very simple example.
It's quite a famous extreme example, though. Yeah, used to run the clock
most
down.
extreme example you could possibly have. But for example, if you would face what we would call back then a Russian team, or a Russian playstyle, they always cut corners in defaults. They don't take things safely. At one point, they always take a risk where they run with a knife in an exposed area or something like this to gain that 1 extra second.
Right.
So the counter to that, in my view, is flash plays. So you flash peek and you move back, and then you use your utility to block. So you always want to fuck them up in their cutting corners.
Yeah.
You want to find out when do they cut corners, when can I, safely get.
So FNATIC is more like we try and identify in the actual round what style are they doing now, and then we do the counter style.
Yes, I would say so.
That's interesting. What do you think, Lydia?
That's actually a theory that we also learned very early with Gopi, or playing with Gopi, where we also said like SK style or Navi style, where he says like, guys, if it's a 3v3 or 4v3, they will just camp. Everyone holds one angle, and if we make the mistake, they will win the round. But if we don't make mistakes and let them come, or let them wait for nothing, then we will win this round. And it's just like a lot understanding of the styles. Like Gambit, for example, they were with the lineup with Dosia, Adrian, and Hobbit. They were just a team that were starting to stack at 120. If it's a 4v5, they start stacking with 4 people on one side, or like one guy is holding somewhere to hear some steps or whatever. On Inferno, he'll be in City Arch and 3 guys on B. So it's just a pure gamble. And we realized it. We understood it after a couple games. And it obviously you can say like that teams from same regions obviously sometimes copy from each other, or from the best teams, like Alternate copied from Big, or I don't know. That doesn't matter. You guys know what I mean. And then you can also say, okay, again, a Russian team, they probably have the similar style to Gambit, who is the number 1 team in the world, or in Russia. So they'll copy their style, and that helped us a lot. Like that's where we actually started to make our big run. And then we copied their styles, and then in our round was, okay, guys, nip style, cash. Everyone just camp on. One guy's holding on the boost, holding the Z connector. One guy's holding only vent, and everyone knows what to do. And it helped us so much during the game to change our styles, because it went from, okay, Gambit style into FNATIC style, like aggressive play. Let's go, everyone go, no baiting, no, just swarm together and take the aim duels and trade with each other. So that's a very, very interesting point that you said, and a very, very smart thing to do. And
yeah,
it makes a lot of sense.
It goes also on the CT side. There's like 3 ways to rotate. You either don't rotate, because like some people, they like faking a lot, so they will only win if you actually rotate. That's the only way they win.
Yes.
If there's a fake, the only way is if they cut you in a rotation. Yeah. Nothing else. And I remember famously, like a team that would never rotate was old Astralis, but not Astralis, but when
it was TSM.
TSM, yes. They would famously just sit in their sites, and they would just be confident enough to hold it on the CT side. And so it was useless faking against them. Completely useless. So we would always go grouped.
So now imagine you know this, how much of an advantage it actually gives you.
Yeah.
Like if you know, okay, Astralis...
Just eliminate all those strats we've ever... Yes. There's no point in doing them.
Yeah, it's very interesting and very, very smart point.
Well, the funny thing about this as well is, in my opinion, you only, just like with communication where it's like levels, you have to like be at this level before you can implement the next level. You can't, like, obviously, this is why I say the American teams aren't stupid. You can't jump straight from we've never played together to the FNATIC system where like I say one word and you're supposed to go, fuck, what did that mean? Like, that takes time playing together, trust, you have to know the guy, he has to play the same position over and over. Obviously there's levels to it. Well, similarly, I would even add in being able to change style. You can't do that until you've learned your own style and your own strengths and what the weakness was. Because one area I've noticed, like, I like to use pro examples, even if people are going to think it's offensive. Like, what, you think pros don't know that? No, maybe their team just never had that coaching or never thought
Everyone knows different things. Like, everyone's not going to know the same things.
No, it's like, I often said this line, just because I'm good at coming up with like good sounding phrasing. So I used to say to people, I know the most about Counter-Strike of anyone who's ever lived. Now, what that does immediately is, first of all, it sounds baller. But secondly, it always triggers people because they go, oh, you think you know more than everyone else? Never said that. Because the whole point is, the things I know are very different from what Olaf Meister knows or what fucking Stuart. Now, they definitely know things I don't know and probably never will. But that's the point. I was just saying it as a general point. So my point in this regard is, an area I can give you an example of a team who's not doing what we're talking about here. Like the premise that you look at not only your style, but what is the play style of the opponent and how is mine going to match up against it? Is if anyone saw after the player break last year, where we had 1 million games of Team Liquid playing Astralis. And everyone was hyped for these games because before the break, Team Liquid was the best, then Astralis was number one again. And if you remember, Astralis won every single one of these series. They won all of the best of threes. Even if it went to 3 maps, they would win. If it went to 2 maps, they would. It didn't matter what Team Liquid did. They would always lose these games, even though Team Liquid could literally beat every other team in the world. So the craziest thing to me was, this was an example when I watched these games, it was like a very clear tendency that would happen over and over again, which means that Team Liquid never thought about this premise. And this was the premise, is when Astralis was playing Team Liquid, because they were so comfortable because they won every time, what they would do is whenever it was a late game scenario or a late round scenario, they would just essentially hold like lurk positions on the map, especially on CT side. And then their logic was, if you kind of like just walk around separately, they're just going to pick you off. Like, this guy's going to be hiding around the box you're not looking at. This guy's going to take a gamble and be in a weird spot. This guy's going to push a smoke and get behind you all. And the mistake Team Liquid made was they would never identify that Astralis was doing this. And so they would just play at the pace of the game. So since the pace of the game slowed down, they would slow down and they would walk. And listen, they were still doing what they would do. Like, they have very good aim. So if you took a normal shoulder peek, yeah, they might shoot you. But the mistake they made in this scenario, in my opinion, this is why actually I love that Moses became their coach, because I know I've had this discussion with him many times, is if I was their coach there, I would just do like timeout. And then all I would tell them is this, is guys, when they do that, when they do a lurk and they spread out on the map, the most obvious counter to do is group up and hit one place fast. If you go as 3 in that one spot, first of all, since they're spread out, they can't have equal numbers there. Secondly, it takes out all that decision making, which they're the best at, by the way, of like what timing to go and what happens after. Like, you take all that, and then it's just a gunfight between the people in that bomb site. And you know what? That's the one area where if we're Team Liquid, we might win that. In every other area, that's their strength. So, like, I'm not making it like they're idiots. Like, it's only this one matchup they were failing in, by the way. They were beating everyone else. But it's an example of where, like, as we're saying, you can get drawn into a game plan or a style that won't fit your team.
Do you think that was actually like preparation issue, or could it be like also like a mental issue, like being afraid against Astralis or watch out devices?
That's probably a factor, yeah. I'm sure. I mean, your emotion obviously affects how you make your decisions and stuff. Yeah. I'm sure as well, by the way, the problem as well is you can't really replicate those scenarios in scrims, right? Like a late round scenario in a scrim. Even if you're playing Astralis, you're not going to play the same way. Neither are they, you know. That's one of those areas where I often say, I mean, FNATIC was classic at this. Like, everyone remembers in that FNATIC era, they used to not only win the games where they were the better team, they would win the games where they weren't the better team. They would just steal the round from nowhere. And I always used to say, one of the things about masters of the game like that is they don't, when the pressure gets big, like react differently. They still just play the same way. But that's like, it's easy to say that. It's very hard to do it, obviously.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things as well. I remember Olaf Meister, for example. He always got mad if we were about to lose, but he always played better when he was mad. So it was like, I knew, like, okay, Olaf is mad now, so it's fine, you know? And I think everyone had the confidence in each other in that sense that they knew, like, okay, it's time. We've done this a million times, being down 10 rounds and still made it back, you know, to win it. So just do it. We could easily remind ourselves of the game yesterday or the game a week before that we did this. So there was never, like, a question that we would lose. It was just like, when are we winning? In our heads, at least, back then.
You're going to like this, Leggy. I've got a fucking... one thing I like to do is I like to memorize really good quotes, right? So I've got a straight fire quote that not many people know. It's a Michael Jordan quote, but it's not a very famous one. But it's like that, right? If you understand this quote, you will understand why people are like in love with his mentality for the game, right? He had a quote that said, "I've never lost a game. I just sometimes ran out of time." As in his mind, if you just kept the game going another hour, he'd eventually win. That is the most killer winning mindset I've ever heard. Because everyone, like, listen, there's plenty of really great champions who won many champions who are like, you know, if you stopped them halfway through a game and it was going really badly, they'd be like, yeah, it's just a bad day. You know, I'll tell you what, I'll get him next time, or I'll watch the demo. It's like, this guy, in that sense, he really never gave up in his mind. Like, he always thought, as long as there's still time on the clock, it's possible. It's baller, isn't it? It's so hard to do, obviously. Again, it's another thing that sounds cool to say, but obviously in his case, he did do it, so fair play.
That's actually fucking insane. There's
what about
special people, man?
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, that's one of the things, actually, why earlier in this discussion when we were talking about comms or how you view the game, I am always very careful to never make it like this is always better than that. Because what you're really figuring out when you talk about these things is, what is a successful person's process? Like, how does he think of things? How did he get to there? And often there's going to be differences, of course. Yeah, there are going to be some very weird differences. I've got a question for you, Devilwalk. Yeah. Obviously, in the more modern day, especially with GODsent, when you've become like a true coach in the modern sense, it's literally your job, etc. One area I wanted to bring up, because I thought this was one of the most misunderstood, like, minor dramas I've ever seen, was this incident you had with Madden, that you got, the play you were talking about earlier, where on stage he was complaining about something, and you just sort of, I won't say you raged at him because you didn't, you just in a firm manner sort of told him, like, you know, this isn't the time to just talk about this now or whatever, or like you messed up or something. Well, I think, or wasn't it something that you were telling him? What was the premise? Set it up for us. What was the situation?
So I think we lost. Before the round, we lost 2 rounds on B again, or before the last round. And mid-round, when they die, he starts like, "How can you not hold B?"
So he's complaining during the round while everyone else is alive, right?
And I just get so mad, like, how can you even ask that question? Like, you have not even seen what happened, you know? So that's the why I reacted like I did. I mean, I shouldn't have reacted on stage. I understand that people but I got so mad I couldn't control myself. I had to get in.
You should have. You have to. You have to tell him, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was wrong because he didn't even see the situation. I think, it wasn't even their bad, like you rewatch it later and like you cannot just tell your teammate while the run is live,
Regardless of how the situation was, you cannot do that. He's your teammate and you go fucking through this together.
But
So
I
if
don't
you don't
think
have
he
fucking
meant it
trust,
that way, but that's how it was viewed from my eyes, and that's how I portrayed it, and that's why I reacted that way.
that's crazy.
Because
Actually.
the reason I ask is because I actually want to know what your experience has been like in that sense. Because obviously, like if people don't know, you did very briefly play in that American Luminosity team, and obviously you've worked with a bunch of different teams. So it's not like you have only experience with Swedes, but it must be very different to coach all these different nationalities. Like in the case of this Madden guy, as you say, he is very much not a Swedish mentality. He's more like people like Serbians, etc. Like they're going to be very blunt, or Poles, etc. Like their whole approach, if people don't know, it's again why actually you can't judge these styles unless you know who the person is. Like VP would argue, but that would fix the problem. If that same argument had happened in a Swedish team, like 3 people are leaving the team after that. Like people have very different.
They wouldn't even
approach
the discussion. They would just like after the game walk away and let's kick him.
Sure. So what has it been like? Because in your case, you have to work with a lot of different nationalities at once.
Yeah. So right now we have Jesse's Finnish, Sen, Stoiko, Slovakian, Crystal, German, and Montenegrin, Pavle, Madden, and Farleg, who is Danish. So we're 6 different nationalities at the moment, and I think it's very challenging. It is extremely challenging, but at the same time, it's fun. It's really fun. Because a lot of I remember when we brought in Madden, and we were doing like a nuke round where we just smoke normal 2 smokes and cross down to secret. And we were getting into like a 3v3 where Crystal was like lurking on main roof. And Pavle's voice, he said, "Where are you, Kevin?" And Kevin panicked and jumped off main roof to like go down secret. But Pavle, all he said was, "Where are you?" But in Pavle's voice, it's, "Where are you, Kevin?" Like
because of the urgency.
He panicked and just ran like he was supposed to be with them. Like he's fucked up. And it was such a funny moment because we realized after, he just asked where you were.
Yes.
And that can be one of the things that is hard to recognize with different cultures and the way you speak and stuff like that in the beginning. But it's definitely challenging but fun.
It's interesting. I kind of fucking love your team. What I wanted to ask about Stoiko, I've heard this interview with HLTV. I don't know if you guys heard it. I'm assuming you did. It's very fucking interesting what the mindset this guy has. I mean, I knew that like just by his tweet, I didn't really talk too much with him or anything outside of the game, but just by his tweets, I can tell like he thinks or like he actually really tries. And I know that he had a very good school degree and really tried hard and everything. And it's very interesting to me how much dedication he has.
Yes.
And I really wonder like if it's really 100%. I don't want to say like he's lying or anything, like genuinely 0. But people tend to say a little bit more in interviews, just to defend themselves or whatever. But is it really like that way that you're like, okay, today I played very good. What did I do? How did I start how did I sleep? How much did I sleep? What did I eat? Whatsoever.
But this is something that we also brought in with. We recently hired a sports psychologist just before like a month before Michael got benched. Because we had a lot of internal issues and we weren't performing. It was like we would play every match, doesn't matter who we were facing, 2-1 and lose, and it would be like the last map we weren't cut up to play 3 long maps, and we were having a lot of internal issues. And one of the things that was brought up is sleeping patterns and when do you eat when you have an official. Like, how much energy do you have? What's the thought process behind it? And we did some exercises where we would play, official games, and we'd write down what we did that day. And then we would have these sessions where, like, there's a German guy, Finnish guy, blah, blah, blah. And it was obviously us, but, like, in a more, like a fun game. Like, who did the best preparation? If he ate this, he slept this amount, he did
Okay.
this, then, and that. And we would all in the team vote and like choose who did the best. And obviously you would gain different kind of points if you answered correctly according to
Okay. Oh, you made it like a fun way to do it.
yeah, like a fun game, and we would
Right.
have like a total score point
Yeah.
of this whole exercise after. And so we worked a lot with it, and we got an understanding of how everyone did it before. For example, Stike would always wake up too early because he's like man of routines, and you know he likes to have his way of doing things. So I think he realized that during that time. But he's definitely like super try hard. Like he definitely like there's very few mistakes. I almost never need to correct him or say like, "Oh, you did something wrong here," or you know, I just leave him on the side. You know, I know I can trust him 1000%. You know, to do the right thing and make the right decision.
Pretty much like that's for big.
Yeah, but he's to me like in 2-3 years, I see him being even possibly an in-game leader. You know, because of how like he knows the game so well, and he's so good in these like trash positions that it's incredible to watch him play almost a carry role in these positions.
Yeah, the thing is, he's actually one of the players who privately I've talked to a number of times, and he's actually, I think he's a very misunderstood player because unfortunately, first of all, obviously, because his stats were bad in many teams, people just think he's a shit player. Like, we all know the usual. Everyone knows the fucking storyline with that, where people just they're not interested, basically, if you don't have good stats. But what people don't know is he's one of those players who has, in terms of strengths, he's a very cerebral person. He's someone who's thinking all the time about what he's doing in the game. Did I do? Even if he wins the game, he's the guy who's thinking about the mistakes or what I could have done differently or how I could have helped a teammate. That's why it was no surprise to me where that famous story came out, where when they'd kicked him from Mouse Sports and they thought, because even the players in the team like bought the Reddit narrative. They were like, right, well, now we've kicked him and brought Snacks in, we're probably going to be way better. And it's like, what they didn't know at the time was, it turned out whenever he died, he would just come for all those players, since they were all different nationalities, the ones who barely would say anything. So it meant that they didn't know it. It wasn't until it was literally gone that they noticed, like, oh, wait, no one's doing that, actually. Like, now, all of a sudden, there's no, like, half the comms, and as a result, the rounds are all messy, and we don't end the round correctly. So they didn't get until they kicked him what they lost. But the problem he has, and I want to know actually if this has changed at all, Devilwalk, his biggest flaw though, and this is unfortunately, it can be a fatal flaw, is just that despite being such a smart guy and someone who was playing like very valuable positions, that if I was his teammate, I would be telling this guy all the time, like, you're like the secret MVP of the team if you do your job, you know, you let us do our job. His biggest flaw was he would always have like low self-esteem of himself if he lost. Like,
What does it mean, sorry?
Like, he wouldn't believe in himself, basically. Like, he didn't believe all the shit I just said. He would think because he made mistakes or people told him he's bad. He would, like, buy into it, sort of, and be like, yeah, I am, like, kind of bad at the moment. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, your job in the role team wasn't to do something at that point. Or, you know, you're doing, like I even used to tell him, if you're a player like that, this is what I would do if I was a coach or in-game leader. I would tell them, dude, you don't need to look at the scoreboard because your frags show up for, like, Simple or whoever our star player is. Like, if you do your job, he gets more kills. So, like, that's how you have to view the scoreboard. You don't look at your number and compare it to someone else in the game. Like, they're not doing your role. Well, does he have any issues with that still, Devilwalk?
I don't see that currently. I think when he joined us, or when we loaned him from Mousesports, the biggest problem I had with him was that he played too correct. So that he wouldn't take risks when risks were needed. Instead, he would just play where he should have been, or where he should be. Or, you know, and that becomes, after a certain point, predictable.
Readable.
Sure.
My problem, I would always like, he would play like A-site on Mirage or whatever, and I would tell him like, just take slope, just go there, you know, take that, push T-spawn, do this, you know, and eventually he just did it by himself. It didn't take long. It took like a couple days, and then he would just take these initiatives by himself, and I think that made him a lot better player. And he's done the groundwork for it himself. All I needed to tell him was once that I think you should play more aggressive. Like, his mechanical skill is insane.
Yeah,
like, I don't know if you've seen his like the Stiko highlights that he does from officials and stuff. Like, it's insane how precise he is. I would compare his aim with like Res, you know, from NIP. It's like mechanically, just instantly you blink and it's on the guy's head. You know, there's no movement in between. It's just there. You know, like so he's an incredible player to have in a team, and especially I think also one of the problems where he never got the chance to choose his roles, which when he joined us, we just told him like, straight up, where do you want to play?
All right.
Yeah, I think that gets also in many people's head. Like, especially when you're in a team like Mouse Sports, where it's like basically everyone fighting for survival, and it's like more you're on your own because it's like everyone from different nationalities. You're not like a bond of 3 Germans where you feel a little bit more secure. So you're always like a little bit And also,
just a bunch of
pressure
mercenaries
from outside. It also fucks you over and like kills you. But I was quickly wondering, question to both of you. Teams like FaZe, for example, or MIBR, obviously they have a certain inconsistency and they're not like performing, I think, where they could perform, or like I think they could be way more consistent.
They're playing against each other right now.
True. Why do these teams not have a sport psychologist? Because just by experience or like just looking at the teams, Australis, they got this lady back then. They won the Boston Major. They started like improving. They brought another sports psychologist in. I think they parted ways. She's now with Enzo or something. Yeah. And I see like every team that like actually got a good sports psychologist who really puts in the time and focus on the team, this team improves. So my question is, why would a team like FaZe not do it or consider it, or MIBR, with the potential that they have? Is it just like the characters that maybe you think, okay, they are hard characters and maybe they are not like, it's pretty much impossible for them to work.
I think it's a bit of that.
I have a story.
For example, GODB, we also brought in a sports psychologist, and so GODB had a history in poker. He played pretty good in poker, and he's been learning like himself, teaching about like tiltness, staying calm and whatsoever.
Okay.
And so when the sports psychologist came and gave us like advices or breathing techniques for how to deal in certain situations when you're nervous, when your heart rate is going up or whatsoever. And for me, it was interesting. I wanted to learn because I know it was a big flaw for myself. But GOP always thought that he mastered this already himself. But why did you just not give it a try, you know?
Yeah,
just do it. You cannot, it's just going to benefit you. It's not going to make it negative or worse. And if you think it's making you worse, just don't do it afterwards. Don't do it after that. But try it. And that's why I'm really upset with teams like FaZe or MIBR who don't consider doing it. Maybe they have, but I never heard of it. So
I honestly think it's like purely the characters themselves. I think it's as simple as this. They vote. Do you want it? No, I don't need it. I think that's how simple it is. Because I remember when we were in FNATIC, like in 2014, when we were struggling, when I was still playing, we had a sports psychologist for like a week or something.
The Bolt
we were just no.
Oh, okay.
It was like way back, and I remember we had to go to these meetings where we had to we walked there the whole team together. It took like 15 minutes or something where we were boot camping. I remember nobody wanted to do it except like me and the Pronax. Like nobody. They were like whining the whole walk there. Like, why do we have to do this? You know, stuff like that. So I think it comes to them. I would imagine. I don't know, of course, that I don't know if FaZe are having a vote like that, but that's how I imagine it being. That they are like, we don't need it. We just need to play more.
Brother, we're comparing here now, let's say 2014-15 Counter-Strike with 2020, and that's like 15 years in a real life, you know?
Listen. I still think people can like be stuck in kind of the same place. I don't think they need to evolve just because we 2 years gone by. You know, I think it's that simple. Or maybe it is that the coach themselves are kind of picking up the slack on that part as well.
You cannot. If you have no professional experience in that, I genuinely think that I have qualities with like talking to humans or friends, or be like, I know how to speak with certain people. Doesn't matter how they react to certain things or whatsoever. But I know for a fact just because I spoke to sports psychologists, how they would approach it. And I think, how the fuck did you approach it, Nico? So I really wonder, like, why those teams wouldn't consider it. And someone in the team has to do a mistake. If not, the organization is doing it for not forcing them to do that. But someone, I think, has to step up in there.
Put it this way, I would speculate, knowing a little bit about some of these people and just from the outside, I think it is like a mixture of personalities, but I also think it's cultural. Like, for example, I'll just very briefly give you an example that's not from CS to make people realize that this isn't like something as simple as like, it's only the bad players doing this. People don't know this. This is one area where Korean esports is way behind the West. Is in Korean esports, sports psychology doesn't exist. And one of the reasons why is because even though in all other areas of esports, Korea was ahead of everyone, you know, they had coaches like 10, 15 years before everyone else. They had structure, training facilities. The problem is in Korean culture, anything to do with the mind is considered like a stigma. So they think to be like any kind of mental illness or anxiety, they think it's bad. And so you don't want it. So you never would admit that was you. You'd be like, no, I'm not like that. Like what? So they think even if in this scenario, like
So it's like the West in the 50s or whatever.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, they exactly. They think you only would need the sports psychologist if you fucked up in your head. Whereas the point we're making here is like, no, this could be very simple things. They could be helping you with how you communicate with people, how you think about after a game. Obviously, you could even be the best player and maybe benefit if it's the right person to suit it to you. So similarly, when I think of like Brazilian culture is a lot about like machismo, about like I'm a man, like I'm strong and I'm brave and all this. Well, people who think that again are going to think, right, I'm like admitting I'm weak basically if I let this guy come in. Like why would he tell me something? Like I should know that. Also remember, some of these players, they've been champions, so they think I don't need it. You know, I won in the past. I don't need any of that stuff. FaZe Clan's a bit more tricky, but I would say similarly there. First of all, the old FaZe Clan was all the players who used to be the best. You're going to have a hard time telling the guy who was the best, like, oh, you have to listen to this guy who's never done Counter-Strike. He's going to tell you how to think in the game. They're going to just go, no, of course not. And listen, like, if you know Nico's personality, he would never have any interest in that at all. So you look at the modern FaZe Clan even though, right? Raid and Nico are super experienced. Coldzera is super experienced. The newer guys just don't know. This is their first team. So in that team, who's going to be open to it? Who's going to want that? So I feel like, sadly, for me, one of the big reasons why I find FaZe Clan actually not a very interesting team is I feel like they have the same problems almost 2 or 3 years now, and they never address it. They really think like that very simple way of thinking of like, I just didn't shoot him in the head. Next time, you know, my game will be better and I'll shoot him in the head. I think that's how they problem solve. So pure speculation there. I'm not claiming to know anyone, but I agree. I think it's at least worth trying, put it that way.
Of course.
I definitely agree. Yeah.
You say about Brazilians. Okay, let's go back to UFC. A fighter, let's say Jose Aldo. He's 15 years or 10 years, however long he was the flyweight champion, unbeaten. Yeah. In every interview, he credits his coach, his trainers, his mental coaches, his what you call it, for food and for anything. They always credit their coaches. And in theory, this guy, he's the best fighter in the world. What is going to coach no better than him? I know I'm in this fucking cage, not you. But this guy is training him to be the best in this fucking world, in this cage. He will tweak your small things, just the small things. You've proven you have won tournaments. You've proven you've been, for periods, the best player in the world. Even faces 2 of them. So why the fuck do you not just work on these fucking small things that might fucking be an issue in your team and just solve them and just try to work with them? And try it 6 months. Face have the money to get you 10 psychologists if you need.
Yes.
And if you then still not win, then God fucking knows what's
if
the problem.
If GODsent can afford,
exactly. There we go.
And I just don't see why not. Just why not? It's not like the sports psychology. It just has to be laziness that people are afraid of working on something that it's like not their comfort zone. Work on outside of just fucking shooting and playing counters. But this is really not FaZe only. Genuinely, we speak often about
there's most teams don't do this.
On them, but they're just often a prime example for.
The problem with this though, mate, is this is basically the exact same. I would call it, like in English, you'd say like a mental paradigm, like their way of seeing the world, how they think the world is structured, what causes what, how you succeed. Theirs just doesn't include this aspect of sports psychology. They think it's about like me and my coach and my teammates. Now, the same exact principle that we're talking about here is what used to happen with coaches. It's actually relevant to this discussion. When the first teams were just great players who won, they all used to say, we don't need coach. Like, what's he going to tell us? Like, he doesn't know the game better. It was the same exact discussion. Like, the craziest thing about it is, right, I've got a brilliant quote for when you argue with people about coaching, because people will do the same thing. Like, they'll make the mistake. I actually think this is the mistake. We've discussed it on past episodes that I think Nico himself makes, which is that someone like Nico and Coldzera as well, as individual players, they have like some of the best game sense ever. So they do know individually what to do for themselves only at all points of the game. And then they sometimes, I speculate, make the judgment, as a result, I don't need to be coached. And it's like, well, maybe you need to be coached as how to work with your teammate. Maybe you need to be coached as the overall strategy. Maybe you don't see something. So here's the line, right? I obviously don't need to tell you guys that coaches have value, but this is the line you use, right? When people say that, like, well, how could you coach him better than him? You know, he's like the best player in the world. It's like, you don't have to be a horse to be a jockey. No. In fact, you know what? If you're the best jockey in the world, you don't win the race. You have to have the best horse as well, right? But the best horse on its own won't win. He needs to be steered. He needs the guy to know how to pace him. Like, the whole point of the jockey in that scenario is he's working with the strength of the horse, isn't he? Like, don't think of it because he's riding it like he's the one who wins. He doesn't. If you give him the worst horse, he'll lose. But the premise there, you get what the point I'm trying to get across to the player is. Like, this guy's here. He isn't here to tell you what to do. He's here to help you figure out what to do. That's the best part about him. And so in the same way, that's what the sports psychologist's here to do, ideally. That's also why you don't just try him once, like you're saying, LEGIJA. You're not just going to one session where he gives you the same generic advice, like breathe a bit. No, ideally, you want a relationship with this guy. He needs to actually know that, like, oh, right, in certain games, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you aren't the guy who needs to breathe. Maybe you're too chill at times. Maybe sometimes you need to fight. Whatever it is, he's going to learn your tendencies. He's going to give you, I would just say, instead of like advice, tools to work with. And you apply the tool, you know, it's up to you if you make it work or not. Like, for example, if you're a guy who goes in there and you really are thinking, this doesn't work, it's all a scam, I'll listen, but afterwards I'm not going to do it. Yeah, then it won't work for you. Definitely won't, because your mind will never be open to it. The tools he gives you, you'll just throw away, and you'll go back and you'll be right. For you, it didn't work because you never applied it. You'll go back to your world and you'll keep doing it. But I would say for some people, we have seen results. So it's another thing to 100%. Give a try, right?
I know we've had results. Like
you don't lose from it.
There's so much to gain. For us, I think it's the only reason our team would survive. You know, like we've had so many problems internally and culturally and everything with all this mix that. For us, it was like the last option to stabilize our team and to make sure that everyone enjoys playing the game with each other and stuff like that. So there's so many things, and I agree on the tools part, but it's not only like it's about figuring out yourself. It's not only him telling you what to do. It's for him to make sure that you know yourself as well. That you know your triggers, when you are the best, when you are, performing, and when you're not. You know, he keeps track of that. But who's gonna be the person himself to be like? Not everyone is like that. Maybe devices, but not everyone's gonna be like, oh, I was a little bit mad before the game today. I had 5 hours of sleep, and write that down and keep track of all that for a long period of time. But this guy is going to do that for you. So, give it a shot.
The craziest thing is, like, you won't even benefit only in-game from this person. This guy is going to teach you life. He is going to teach you life. That's what he's fucking doing. That's what he's learned for years. And that's what his job is. He's not going to tell you, okay, Nico, you have to call like this. You have to do this. This execute wasn't good. Fuck that. But you will benefit as a human being from this person as well.
He wants you to make your life feel good.
Yes. He wants to make your life easy and wants to make you feel good and happy. And being happy and feeling good and having no issues in life will increase your performance by a certain amount of percentage. And then whatever you have on top of that, this could make you a fucking champion. Because sometimes a team like FaZe is just missing 5 or 10% to win a tournament, to win an important game, to make it to the finals.
Yeah, by the way, if anyone wonders why LEGIJA specifically picked FaZe and MIBR, he's picking those teams if it wasn't obvious, because he thinks the pieces they have in those teams maybe could be a champion, maybe could be better already, but you look at the pieces and they obviously have a disconnect. Something doesn't work, something goes wrong, and they're not actually even as good as, the names on paper should be. So it's logical that the first thing you look for is you look at what is going on aside from just playing Counter-Strike. Like, is there something about how they view the game or how they get themselves ready for a big match or something like that? I get why you pick that example. Like Devilwalk, I've got a specific player I want to ask about. And even though it's a specific player, we're not just asking for the drama. It's because it connects to the bigger topic of coaching, which is obviously you just recently had the infamous Makaleli in your team. And a very similar thing happened to him in this team, as has actually happened many times in his career, which is at one point in time, he was an instrumental player in the team, but eventually there was kind of like an internal mutiny and people wanted him to be kicked out of the team and they didn't want to play with him. And even though in this particular case, one thing I did point out every time this was brought up was this is a bit different from past cases, because even just individually wise, he was playing much worse. Like some of the past teams, like when he was kicked out of NIP most famously, he was still a pretty good player and actually their team looked like it was going to get worse. In this case, I get it that he was actually also not playing very well, but that wasn't the main reason, right? It was again some kind of like something about the way his attitude was with the team or behavioral aspects. So can you just give us a quick overview so we can kind of use this as a topic?
Well, first of all, like the drama itself that happened afterwards has nothing to do really with why he got kicked or benched, because the foundation of the problem that we had was more about commitment. So an example of that would be that maybe he would play 60 to 70 hours every 2 weeks, right? Whilst everyone else in the team would be on 120, 110.
Right.
And his reasoning was that he played better at that amount of hours. Whilst the team would be like, yeah, but we put in effort outside of practice. We have a certain goal and want to reach it, and we had several meetings with him and the team about him getting his hours up. And this is during like a 6 months period, and it would never really change that much. Not to the, level that maybe people in the team expected it to be. And that's really, the underlying reason why this happened. And then we got the offer to sign Farlig. Like, we didn't actively search for him, but it was something about like Copenhagen Flames approached us because I think Farlig didn't want to sign a new contract. I can't confirm that, but that's how I remember it. With the Copenhagen Flames, I wanted to leave, and Copenhagen Flames wanted to be nice with Farlig and like try to find a good team for him. So they contacted us and they wanted to sell like Farlig on the cheap, just so that they would know that he would have a good team and would like have a good team to develop in for the future. So we basically got that option, and we were having all these internal problems at the same time that we just made a vote in the team, and whatever happened. It wasn't like a master, we're gonna kick him. It was basically, we've had all these issues. What do people think? Okay, that's what you guys think. Let's proceed with it. So it's simple as that. It was never that I don't like personally that people disliked him or anything. People were just annoyed that he wouldn't commit the same amount of time that everyone else in the team did.
Enough.
What do you think? This is a general topic that leads from that. Like, how much say do you think players should have in who stays in teams, joins teams, what the form of the team is? So
I think it would be, as a coach, even if I would have, let's say, 100% of the power, I would still ask my players about anything. I would not do anything that they were not comfortable with. Let's put it that way.
What about this, though? When you say that, let's say you ask them, right? So you're asking initially for their input, like, what do you think about, should we remove X? And what about if I brought in player Y, right? What if they were all, like, let's say 4 out of 5 of them are against it, but you personally wanted to do it? How do you kind of resolve that?
Then I would just say screw it, because it's not like I don't know. In GODsent, I get a lot of confidence from like the organization. Like they didn't bring this to the team; they brought it to me. We talked about it, and they asked my honest opinion if it would be an upgrade or not. And I said,
Okay.
I think it's an upgrade. Like on an individual basis, I think it's an upgrade. And then I got the objective to just ask everyone, and I just asked everyone in a 1v1 meeting, like, what do you think about this player? Do you think this would be better for us? Do you think it's worth a shot? That kind of deal. I think it's important that everyone is okay with it, because I know as an org or a coach, or my job is also on kind of like the sports psychologist thing. Like I want my players to be happy and satisfied with who they're playing with, how they're playing, and everything in between there, because I personally know that when I was happy, I played better. So it's my job to make sure in a way that they perform, and if making them happy will make them perform, then I will do it. That's how I view it. Okay. And I mean, there's different cases for different people. Some people, they're never satisfied, but some people are. And I don't know, I would not be comfortable making a decision without having the backing of the majority of the players.
What about you, LEGIJA?
I share his thinking. The thing is, in Counter-Strike, unfortunately we are still very unprofessional. Even the best players in the world, we still are not that as professional as a fucking football player is, or whatever.
Sure.
Just from experience, and it's very hard to sometimes, let's just say, take two players, Nico and coldzera. You want to bring them both in a team, but they're not good with each other. Like outside of the game, they didn't really speak. They had a big fight for 2 years and big rivalry. He doesn't want to play with him, but brother, you will benefit from it if you both just fucking agree to it and both have the same goal. We both want to win. This is not a solo competition.
So you might try and convince him in that scenario?
I personally wouldn't, because I know that it wouldn't work, but that would be for me the best, in the, how do you say,
an ideal world.
In an ideal world, exactly. Yeah. Where I had the opportunity to just say, okay, I will pick this guy and you guys will fucking work with each other. But people get butthurt, and also the sad thing is also you don't get in every organization the support as a coach that you sometimes wish you have to. So you have to sometimes also think of your own job, and like, if you fuck up, you're fucking out, So you always, like, I always considered, like, with my team in any change that we've made, I always spoke to my teammates and asked for their what they think about it. But in the end, I kind of still, like, in envy, I wanted to have it in the end, the saying who is going to play or who not. And yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. It really depends on the players that you have. If you have like people that are stubborn or like don't like competition, or he's gonna play my role, I don't want to. No, he's not the type of player. Yeah, it's sometimes hard, and it's depending a little bit on the players that you play with. Because in Big, for example, I know I could have done that because I managed to get Smooya in, and Smooya didn't really have the best reputation back then. Of course. But I know he had this fucking talent that he has. But yeah, the team was against it at the beginning, but I was like pushing for it and fighting for it, especially talk to my CEOs and whatsoever, and they trusted me, and in the end we brought him in, with some of the people not really wanting it, and in the end we suffered a little bit from that, but they somehow managed to work it out.
Yeah, Devilwalk, one thing I want to ask you, actually, we'll make this like the final topic, because I know we have to go soon, so we'll wrap on this, right? I wanted to ask you, in line with what LEGIJA was saying there, that is also a massive problem that coaches face that I think a lot of fans don't stop and think about, which is, in theory, when you join the team, you're trying to look at, like, what is the best this team could ever be? Like, what would we need to do to reach the best level? But the problem is that's a long-term goal with many steps along the way. But in your job, it really is the case that even those first steps that you're trying to take they happen while you're going to tournaments where if you place last place at 4 of those tournaments in a row, you might be fired. So you might only get 2 months. So even though, and the reason why this is tough, and we've talked about this on past episodes, I want to get your take on it, is because obviously certain things that in the very long term would make you, in theory, the absolute best team, actually might initially make you a bit worse while you implement them now. So you're kind of torn between, you've got to have the short-term results to get the support and even have a job, but you're going for something that's a long-term project. So what has that experience been like for you?
To be honest, I've never really had that issue. I think when I was in FNATIC, Thorin was kind of my mentor. So I never felt like I was under any like threat of losing the job I had. And right now I'm in like GODsent in that sense that I have Pronax, my old like player and teammate, and I have a really good relationship with the org. And we have like weekly meetings talking about how things are going, and they trust me. At least that's how I feel that they do, that they trust me a lot with what I'm doing. So I can't really say I've had an experience where I've ever felt like, I might lose my job here if I make this decision. I do think that it's extremely tough. Sometimes even in the sense of a team survival mode, because sometimes you're at a stage in a team where you need short-term results, like
of course, yes,
otherwise you're just done, even though you're thinking long-term, just as you said, like you want long-term always,
yes,
but sometimes you just like, I don't know if we survive a week if we don't win this game. And that way, it can be really, really tough what to change, how to run things, and in that sense, lose the project. I would say I've been scared of losing, but not my job.
That's one of those things. I've told a few of the anecdotes, but fans don't know some of the like teams that like, I'm talking like teams that won majors and stuff, where if they'd have lost the right game at the wrong time, they split up instantly after that. They don't win the major. Some of those players probably say, fuck you, never play together. And instead, they won majors, like eras. Some of the people, that's actually one thing that I think is probably most misunderstood. Everyone who's in the low level teams is like, oh, we've got all these problems and don't get along with this guy. It's like, those problems exist in the best teams. They're just better at dealing with it, you idiot. Like, they're not all really best friends. Like, come on.
No, I've heard that actually from Australis that they had like issues at the very beginning with the team. And like from players you would never ever expect it, but it is what it is. And every team has its issues, but it's just how the way how to deal with them, and how professional am I as a human being and as a player to take this problem and put it aside, at least whilst I'm playing. There's so many players also in football. They don't have to. They fight each other in practice sometimes. They slap each other. It happens. It will always happen.
Sure.
It's emotions, and sometimes you cannot fucking know how to deal with them. But when it matters, they know, like they should know. And
on
in
that,
Counter-Strike, many of us don't know.
On that, I think that everyone ever has had a friend they've spent too much time with.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they don't like that person. They just spend too much time with them. Imagine that times like 100, because there's no break. You're spending 10 to 12 hours a day with this person. You cannot change that. You cannot just say like, let's just not talk to each other for 2 days. You're still going to talk to each other for those 10 to 12 hours every day.
Yes.
And that's how it is. And so these problems, they will come up. There's no doubt about it. And they will happen to every single person. Doesn't matter how nice, how like bad or ragey you are. They will happen to everyone.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good way to maybe for people to understand, like if you've had a friend that you've ever spent too much time with, you're just sick of him for a week.
Happens. I have one question, Duncan, if you still have time. Sorry.
Yeah, all right.
I have one question. What happened to the Swedish scene? Like, if I say like 5 years ago, you would always think like, who is the next Swedish talent coming up? Who is the next Swedish best player in the world? But now you have FNATIC, you have Nip a little bit more behind, and then you have pretty much
Pretty much nothing. Come on.
Like genuinely nothing.
Yeah.
Like in Denmark, you have always these teams like, I don't know,
Copenhagen
Heroics. Denmark
Flames,
is a different. Denmark is anyways different. But there's always like Brazil, they have Furia, they have again 2-3 teams that are competing on a higher level, and always a little bit promising coming up, even in Poland, where there's no very best teams, but there's many prospects coming. And from a country like Sweden, which has been famously like in Counter-Strike pretty much always number one on the talent scale, where did that go and why did it go if there's a why? Because I know for us in Germany, it's pretty much our fault because we didn't want to develop people. We were fucking assheads in the end and just focused on ourselves and never really gave other people opportunities. Whilst back then, for example, GOP, when Alternate Ethics was playing in 1.6, Mousebots was watching. They went on TeamSpeak together before the games, Aprox and GOP, talking about tactics. What can we do? Moon coming on TeamSpeak. They talk, how can you play against G5? Okay, they play this style. You have to play like... They helped each other. But for us, there was no fucking helping. No, I didn't want another German player to succeed. It sounds fucking ridiculous and stupid and very egoistic, but I want to be the best German player, German team in Germany, you know? That's why I don't want to even give them the chance opportunity, because I know I can influence their opportunity kind of-ish. That's why I wonder if that's...
Well,
like
in reality, they are gunning for your job in a sense.
Yes, and that's why I don't give you the opportunity or chance. But which in my today's thinking, I think it's stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
I don't know.
What's your theory about the Swedish scene then, Devilwalk?
My theory? Well, honestly, I would bring it back to that it's kind of time, because we've been successful since pretty much the start of esport.
Yeah.
And the people that are coming up in today's talent pool, they've known nothing else. And I also always said that Swedes are the worst person or people online. There is no comparison. I don't care if you say Russians. Swedes are absolutely the worst people you can face in a Faceit game. Or if you played Dota, if you ever met a Swede, there's nothing. They're so cocky. They think they're the best in the world at everything, and there's no convincing them otherwise. And I think the attitude of that is what has hurt themselves. They think because they are a Swede and Swedes are good at games, they don't have the humility to learn.
Interesting.
Okay.
That's my theory.
I'll give you one little angle, just because I'm going to come from my own perspective and where I've come from, which is if you ever followed CS 1.6, it was legendary that one of the ways you made it as talent there was you went to all those small lands in Sweden, Rendezvous, there was a million of them, and there was so many of them, right, that even the top pros, because they didn't actually travel as much, some of the top pros would attend those lands, and what they would do is they'd go with a mixed team of like 2 other guys that are friends of theirs from a tier 2 team, and then some guy who's that guy's brother, and they would go just for fun, but it meant that when you played in that tournament as like an up-and-coming player, you get to play against Get Right or fucking Gox or some of these top players, and also they get to see if you're good. Like they get to start to see, hey, actually that guy was legit. Like I played him, he like upset us in this carp or something, you know. So like there's like a direct connection between the literal grassroots of people who just play the game for fun and are getting slightly competitive and the top. Like there's like a chain of people where you can come through, whereas like it doesn't feel like that exists now. Like I don't really see those. Like, are there still small lands in Sweden?
There's a few, I guess, like 2 maybe, but I don't pay attention to them. I don't think anyone does anymore. But I also do, on your point, I do remember one of the best things that Sweden ever had was the like friendly team ladder. You would play 5v5. And
clan base or whatever?
It was basically clan based, but it was only Swedes, and it was only like mixes. So at night after practice, all the top teams would go as like Smurfs accounts with their IRL friends, and then every pro would have like a team with their IRL friends, and you would challenge each other on the server. And there were this whole ladder thing where you could just grind. And after that disappeared, I have no clue who is even good in Swedish CS anymore. I have no clue.
But if you take that in consideration, Duncan, it should be theoretically way easier today to make like this jump from like being a up and coming player to the pro scene. You have FPL, which is like tremendous for you. And who's gonna give a fuck about like what professional player is gonna give a fuck about the 500 euro land in wherever in his country?
Sure.
He's not gonna go because it's just waste of time for him. Rarely someone is gonna go. I know that Smuya is going to this I-47 or whatever these lines are called, but rarely you see a player like having even interested in doing that or even the time. But I genuinely believe that like the ladder for you becoming a professional player is much easier now than it was back then. Back then you pretty much had no chance unless a professional guy actually brings you in a team or brings you into the scene. I know it myself because I was the happiest person. I sold out my own friends to get in this fucking group where all these in-houses are being played. I stopped playing with my real life friends just to become like
I did exactly
to get into this group. And my friends flamed me for that and said, how can you do that? Why do you sell us out? I said, brother, it's my fucking dream. It's my dream. And that has nothing to do with you or anything. I just want to become a professional player. And where else am I going to get a professional player if it's not there where all the professional players are living, playing, or spending their days? So that's why I think today is like so much easier to become a professional player. And you have many, you can see it, like a player like Robs. How the fuck would he have become a professional player 10 years ago?
I'll say it this way. I won't agree that I think it's easier. I think it's easier for certain types of players. And that's actually
the
also,
competition is bigger for you.
Yeah, but here's the problem. You're right. If you're Rops, it's even better because obviously Rops would have no chance. He's been the Estonian scene and, you know, like we'd never hear from him, would we? But that's also his style of play though, mate. Here's the problem. I think it's way harder for Devilwalk to make it in the pro scene than it is for Rops because here's the thing. If Devilwalk goes to FPL, people aren't going to be like, oh my God, the craziest name ever, let's sign him. So they'll never see the value of what he brings to a team. So that's why I say it has to be sort of like organized competition, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know?
There's absolutely.
It has to be 5v5 teams.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because what's going to impress us about Devilwalk if we're the opposing players is if we actually play against his team that he plays in at tier 3 and then we see like think of Tizian now in Big. It's not highlights that are making people think he's a good player. It's like, how is he always in these clutch scenarios and wins them? How does he always have these weird spots where he learns like an off angle that no one else... Like, that's what impresses you. It's nothing to do with like highlights, you know? So if you're Rops, if you're Biomass, if you're like Brocky, if you're these players, I think it's easier. I think there's other types of players though where I think it's actually way harder in some ways.
I'll link you a game where the last game GODsent played. And I was calling this game as a mix with the Swedish friends and Kalle, you know, the Norwegian guy.
Yeah, from back in the day.
And they instantly split up after we won this game.
This video was kindly supported by Pronogo, Whattathings, Spencer Green, Soliko, Dean Tanglis, Jack Hanna, Hades, Jensen Goh, the Puyallup Tribe, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to put a question to me in my monthly video AMA. Do you want teasers for my upcoming content? Or maybe to even take part in an online esports discussion with moi? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.